Napoleon Bonaparte conquered most of Europe. He defeated the greatest armies of his time, overthrew empires, and made kings tremble. But in 1807, he was completely overwhelmed by an enemy he never expected, an army of rabbits. By the summer of 1807, Napoleon was at the height of his power. He'd just signed the treaties of Tilsit, which ended the war between France and Russia. It was a massive diplomatic victory. Napoleon had essentially forced the Russian Tsar to become his ally. To celebrate, Napoleon decided to throw a party. But this wasn't just any party, this was Napoleon. So naturally, he planned an elaborate hunting expedition for himself and his top military officers and officials. The man in charge of organizing this hunt was Alexander Berthier, Napoleon's chief of staff. Berthier had organized countless military campaigns. He'd coordinated the movements of hundreds of thousands of soldiers across Europe. Planning a simple rabbit hunt? That should be easy. Berthier wanted to impress Napoleon, so he went all out. He arranged for the event to take place on a massive estate. He invited dozens of high-ranking officials. And most importantly, he ordered his men to gather rabbits, lots of rabbits, to be released for the hunt. The idea was simple. Release the rabbits, let Napoleon and his guests chase them on horseback, shoot a few, have a great time, go home victorious. Berthier's men gathered somewhere between hundreds and possibly over 1,000 rabbits. The exact number varies depending on the source, but everyone agrees it was a lot of rabbits. The day of the hunt arrived. Napoleon and his entourage showed up in their finest hunting attire, armed with guns and accompanied by beaters, men whose job was to flush out the game. The rabbits were kept in cages along the edge of the field. At the signal, Berthier's men opened the cages. The rabbits were released. Everything was going according to plan. Except the rabbits didn't run away. Instead, they charged directly at Napoleon and his hunting party. At first, everyone thought it was amusing. A few confused rabbits hopping toward them. Cute? Funny, even. They'd scatter any second, but the rabbits kept coming, hundreds of them. They weren't running away in fear. They were swarming toward the hunters like a fuzzy, hopping tidal wave. Napoleon's men tried to shoo them away. They waved their arms. They yelled. Nothing worked. The rabbits just kept charging. They tried using their riding crops to scare them off. The rabbits didn't care. They hopped right past the horses, climbing up the men's legs, jumping onto their boots, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Napoleon himself was targeted. Rabbits swarmed around his legs. They allegedly tried to climb up his jacket. The most powerful man in Europe was being mobbed by bunnies. His men attempted to help. They tried forming a defensive line, an actual military tactic, against rabbits. Didn't work. The rabbits just hopped through. The men resorted to using their guns, but you can't shoot hundreds of rabbits at once. And besides, this was supposed to be a celebration, not a massacre. Napoleon, realizing this situation was completely absurd and entirely unwinnable, decided to retreat. He headed back toward his carriage. The rabbits followed. Napoleon climbed into his carriage, probably thinking he'd finally escaped. But some of the rabbits allegedly jumped into the carriage with him. Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who'd stared down the armies of Europe, was now fleeing from rabbits in his own carriage. His driver whipped the horses into motion, and they sped away from the field, leaving the hunting party in chaos and the rabbits victorious. So, what went wrong? Here's the thing, Berthier had made a critical mistake. When organizing the hunt, he'd told his men to gather rabbits for the event. What he should have specified was that they needed wild rabbits, animals that would be terrified of humans and run away. Instead, his men took the easy route. They went to local farms and bought domesticated rabbits. These weren't wild animals afraid of people. These were tame rabbits that had been hand-fed by humans their entire lives. So when the cages opened and these rabbits saw a field full of humans, they didn't see predators. They saw the people who normally fed them. They were hungry. And they charged toward what they thought was dinner time. Napoleon had inadvertently created an army of rabbits that associated humans with food, and they attacked with the determination of soldiers expecting a meal. The hunt was canceled. There's no record of Napoleon ever trying a rabbit hunt again, and honestly, can you blame him? This story spread through European high society. Imagine being Napoleon. You've conquered nations, defeated coalitions, crowned yourself emperor, and now everyone's talking about the time you got chased off a field by bunnies. To make it worse, there was nothing he could do about it. You can spin a military defeat, you can reframe a political loss, but there's no dignified way to explain running away from domesticated rabbits. The incident became one of those bizarre footnotes in history that reminds us that even the most powerful people can be completely undone by the simplest mistakes. In this case, the mistake was nobody specified wild rabbits. So the next time you're having a bad day at work, just remember Napoleon Bonaparte once retreated from a battlefield because of fluffy bunnies. If you want more ridiculous true stories from history, subscribe for new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. History is full of moments that are too absurd to make up.